Here's a more vivid and emotionally gripping rewrite of your story. For 3 years, my life followed what felt like a perfect script. I had found love in Mariana, the woman I had always dreamed of, the one who made my quiet world feel complete. She was my light, my joy, the missing piece that balanced my reserved nature with her vibrant energy. We met in university, and from the first moment, she captivated me. Her laughter, her effortless charm, the way she spoke about the world with such passion, it was impossible not to fall for her. While I preferred the quiet corners of life, she danced in its center, always drawing people in. Together, we formed what seemed to be an unshakable bond. In the eyes of others, we were the perfect couple. For the first 2 years, that illusion held firm. Weekends were spent at each other's homes, our families growing familiar, intertwining like the roots of a tree. I believed we were building something real, something that would last. But love, as I would come to learn, is not immune to deception, and the cruelest betrayals often come from where we least expect them. It began with the smallest of changes. Mariana, once so open, so eager to share the details of her life, became distant. Conversations shortened, plans were canceled, and work became an excuse that kept her away. I told myself it was nothing, just a rough patch, something every couple goes through. But deep inside, an unease started to grow, a whisper I could not ignore. One night, after she failed to show up for a dinner I had planned, a night meant to be special, I turned to the one person I had always trusted, my father. Sitting in the living room, I confided in him, my voice laced with uncertainty. "Dad, something feels off with Mariana. She's pulling away, making excuses. I don't know if I'm overthinking, but I can't shake the feeling that something is wrong." He was quiet at first, watching me in that way he always did when he had something important to say. Then, with a sigh, he spoke. "Son, sometimes we don't see what's right in front of us. I don't want to worry you, but I've noticed things about Mariana that don't add up. I think you need to be careful." His words struck me harder than I expected. My father was not one to meddle, not one to cast doubt without reason. If he had noticed something, perhaps my fears weren't just paranoia. Yet, despite the growing pit in my stomach, I tried to brush it off. Love is a way of making us blind, of making us cling to the versions of people we so desperately want to believe in. But his warnings didn't stop. During a family dinner, with Mariana just a few feet away, he leaned in and lowered his voice. "Sebastian, listen to me. I know you don't want to believe it, but she's seeing someone else. I've seen it with my own eyes." My chest tightened. "How can you be so sure?" He hesitated, then delivered the final blow. "I saw her with another man. She was kissing him. This isn't a misunderstanding. I didn't know how to tell you." My world tilted. My breath felt heavy in my lungs. Mariana, the woman I had loved so completely, the woman I had planned a future with, was unfaithful. A war raged inside me, a battle between denial and the truth staring me in the face. But I needed to see it for myself. The next day, I followed her. I watched as she moved through the streets, glancing around as if she feared being seen. I trailed her to a quiet cafe in the city center, my heart pounding like a drum inside my chest. And then I saw him, the man she had chosen over me. But it wasn't a stranger. It wasn't some unknown figure. It was my father. Everything around me blurred. The walls of the world I had known came crashing down in an instant. My mind screamed at me to react, to storm inside, to demand an explanation, to break something, anything, but my body refused to move. My father, the man I had trusted above all else, the man who had guided me, taught me, be my protector, the man who had sat across from me and planted the seed of doubt in my mind, was the one betraying me in the worst way possible. And Mariana, the woman who had whispered love into my ears, who had made me believe we had a future, who had promised me forever, had been lying all along. I stood frozen, watching them laugh together, watching their hands touch, watching my world shatter piece by piece. There are betrayals that cut deeper than words can describe. And in that moment, I realized the most painful wounds are the ones inflicted by those we love the most. The feeling of betrayal crept through me like a slow poison, consuming me from the inside out. My body was rigid, my breathing rapid, as if the very air had turned against me. Shock paralyzed my limbs, but beneath the surface, something burned, a fire of rage so intense it threatened to consume me entirely. My thoughts clashed violently, an uncontrollable storm inside my head. What was I supposed to do? How could I even begin to process something so devastating? I couldn't just stand there. I needed answers. Despite the fury clawing at my chest, I forced myself to breathe, to hold back the storm raging within me. My mind screamed for immediate action, for confrontation, but I knew that if I didn't control myself, I might do something reckless. Without drawing attention to myself, I turned and slipped away, disappearing into the night like a ghost. I needed space, needed silence, needed to collect the shattered remains of my sanity before I faced a man who had broken everything I held sacred. As night fell, I found myself walking toward my parents' house, each step heavier than the last. My heart pounded furiously, threatening to burst from my chest. Every memory, every conversation I had shared with my father played in my mind like a cruel joke. How many times had I confided in him, trusted him to guide me through my doubts? How could I have been so blind? How could I have not seen the truth hiding behind his words? He had been the source of my suffering all along. When I finally reached the house, I hesitated at the door, my pulse a deafening drum in my ears. I didn't know what I was going to say, didn't know how to face him. But something inside me screamed that it was time. Time to rip off the mask. Time to destroy the illusion. Stepping inside, I found him sitting alone in the living room, just as he always did. His expression was calm, too calm. He looked up as I entered, his eyes locking onto mine. There was something different in them tonight. A flicker of unease, a quiet understanding that the moment he had been dreading had finally arrived. For a few agonizing seconds, I stood in the doorway, staring at him, my mind racing, my hands clenched so tightly my nails dug into my palms. Then, unable to hold it in any longer, the words spilled from me like a dam breaking, raw and trembling. "Dad!" My voice barely held together, shaking under the weight of my emotions. "I know." His brow furrowed slightly, confusion flickering across his face. But I wasn't finished. "I know what you've been doing. I know what you've done to Mom." My voice cracked, but I held my ground, forcing myself to look straight into his eyes. His face darkened, his body stiffening ever so slightly. For a fleeting moment, silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. I didn't need him to confirm it. I already knew. And Mariana, I continued, my anger rising like a tidal wave, swallowing any hesitation I had left. "I followed her today. I saw her. I saw her walk into that cafe." My breath hitched, but I pushed forward. "I saw her with you. Dad, I saw her kiss you." The words hung in the air, sharp as knives, slicing through whatever defenses he had left. He inhaled deeply, exhaling with a weight that made the very room feel smaller. Slowly, he stood, his movements deliberate, his face tight with something I couldn't quite decipher, guilt, fear, regret. "Sebastian." He finally spoke, his voice hollow, as if the confession itself was stealing the breath from his lungs. He hesitated, struggling for words. "I don't know how to tell you this, but everything I said, everything I made you believe, it's much more complicated than you think." Complicated. The word rang in my ears, infuriating, meaningless. My fists clenched at my sides. Complicated. My voice rose, filled with disbelief, with disgust. "No, Dad, this isn't complicated. This is betrayal. You lied to me. You manipulated me. You let me believe Mariana was cheating when the truth was, it was you all along." He closed his eyes, as if trying to block out the reality crashing down around him. When he opened them again, I saw something I had never seen before. Defeat. "I know," he whispered, his voice barely more than a breath. "I have no excuse, Sebastian. I failed you." He exhaled shakily, his hands running over his face. "When it started, I didn't think about the consequences. I was lost. She made me feel something I hadn't felt in a long time. And then, before I knew it, I couldn't stop. But when I saw you with her, saw how much you loved her, I realized what I had done. I wanted to stop. I wanted to fix it, but I couldn't find a way back." His words meant nothing. They were empty, weightless against the storm inside me. My voice trembled with restrained rage. "That doesn't matter, Dad." My vision blurred, anger and heartbreak battling for control. "Nothing you say will change what you did. Nothing will undo the damage." He looked at me then, truly looked at me, and for the first time, I saw it, the weight of his regret, the crushing burden of his choices. But it was too late. There was no fixing this. The silence between us was unbearable, stretching like a chasm that could never be crossed. I had lost him. The man I had once admired, once trusted above all else, no longer existed. He was just a stranger now, a shadow of the father I had once known. I turned away, my chest tight, my legs heavy. I couldn't stay here. Couldn't listen to more apologies that would never be enough. I walked toward the door, each step ripping me further from the past I could no longer hold on to. "I know I've failed you. Sebastian," he called after me, his voice laced with desperation. "I know I've broken your trust. But please," his voice faltered, "I never wanted to hurt you. I will do whatever it takes to." I stopped, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. But I didn't turn around. "No, Dad." My voice was firm, final. "I don't want to hear any more. You failed me, and I don't know if I can ever forgive you." With those last words, I stepped out of the house, leaving behind the broken remnants of a past I could no longer carry. But it wasn't over yet. There was still one more person who owed me answers. Mariana. I refused to let her escape this as if nothing had happened. She had destroyed my trust, my love, my faith in everything we had built, and I would not stand idly by while she pretended none of it mattered. When I arrived at her apartment, she was just stepping outside, her expression light, her smile untouched by the destruction she had left in her wake. But the moment her eyes met mine, she faltered. Her body stiffened for just a second, her lips parting ever so slightly as if she had been caught in the act. But then, like the skilled deceiver she was, she recovered, forcing a smile, a soft, artificial laugh. "Love," she said sweetly, tilting her head. "What are you doing here?" But she knew everything was about to change. I took a step closer, my voice cold, steady. "I saw you, Mariana." Her smile faded. "I saw you with my father." Here's a rewritten version with richer language and more vivid detail. The feeling of betrayal coursed through my veins like a slow-acting poison, spreading its toxic grip from the pit of my stomach to the very edges of my being. My body was rigid, my breath coming in shallow, ragged gasps. I was frozen in shock, yet beneath the paralysis, something burned, a wildfire fury threatening to consume me whole. Thoughts clashed violently in my mind, but none settled long enough to make sense. I felt trapped in a labyrinth of emotions, unable to find my way out. How was I supposed to face this? How could I begin to comprehend the devastation that had just unfolded before my eyes? But I couldn't just stand there. I needed answers. Even as anger surged through my chest, I forced myself to breathe deeply, steadying the tempest within. My heart pounded like a war drum as I slipped away from the place of my undoing, careful not to be noticed. I sought refuge in solitude, a quiet corner where I could gather my thoughts, where I could keep myself from doing something reckless. Nightfall found me on the path to my parents' house, my footsteps heavy with dread. The closer I got, the faster my heart pounded. Every conversation I had ever had with my father played back in my head, every word of advice, every look of reassurance. How many times had I confided in him about my doubts regarding Mariana? How many times had I leaned on him, trusting his wisdom, never once suspecting that he was the architect of my suffering? I stepped inside, and there he was, just as I had always found him, sitting alone in the dimly lit living room. His face bore an unsettling calmness, too composed for the storm that was about to hit. The moment his gaze met mine, a flicker of recognition crossed his features. He knew something was coming. For a long moment, I stood there, my mind racing, my throat tight with unshed rage. When I finally spake, my voice was barely above a whisper, trembling under the weight of my emotions. "Dad," I said, the word foreign on my tongue. "I know." His brows knitted in confusion, but he didn't speak. He simply watched me, waiting for the storm to break. "I know what you've been doing to Mom." The room felt like it had shrunk around us. A shadow passed over his face, but still he remained silent. Then, with uncontainable fury, I continued, Mariana. The name came out like venom. I followed her today. I saw her. Dad, I saw her walk into that cafe. I saw her kiss you. My voice cracked, the words slicing through the air like a blade. You told me I should distrust her. You warned me about her. But all this time, it was you. You were the one betraying me. My father rose slowly from his seat, the tension between us crackling like a live wire. His expression faltered. There was pain, regret, but also something deeper, something that made my stomach churn. Sebastian, he murmured, his voice raw with something I couldn't quite name. He hesitated, searching for words. Everything you thought you knew. It's more complicated than you realize. Complicated. That word shattered what little control I had left. Complicated. I spat, incredulous. That's what you have to say? You've been lying to me for months. You watched me struggle, question, doubt, while you stood there pretending to be my guide, all the while sneaking around with a woman I loved. His shoulders sagged under the weight of his mistakes. He ran a hand down his face, his regret plain as day. I know, son, I have no excuses. I never meant for this to happen. When it started with Mariana, I wasn't thinking about the consequences. She made me feel something I hadn't felt in a long time. I got lost, and when I realized what I had done, when I saw you with her, I knew I had crossed a line I could never uncross. His words did nothing but fan the flames of my rage. That doesn't matter, I said, my voice shaking. Nothing you say will undo what you've done. The weight of his sins bore down on him, but my pain was too great to offer him any solace. The man I had once idolized now stood before me as a stranger, a hollow shell of the father I had known. I turned on my heel, the air suffocating me. His voice followed me as I walked away, desperate, pleading. I know I failed you, Sebastian, he called after me, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes. I stopped at the doorway but didn't turn back. My voice was firm, though my heart was breaking. No, Dad, you failed me, and I don't know if I can ever forgive you. I left, the night swallowing me whole. But I wasn't done. I needed answers from Mariana. When I arrived at her apartment, she was stepping out, a careless smile on her lips. It faltered the moment she saw me. In an instant, her expression shifted from happiness to tension, her body going rigid with unspoken fear. She knew what was coming. Love, she said, forcing a smile, her voice strained. What are you doing here? I didn't answer right away. I let the silence stretch between us, heavy and unbearable. Finally, I spoke, my voice devoid of warmth. I saw you. The color drained from her face. I saw you with him. The words tasted bitter. And now I know. You've been cheating on me all this time. She opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. Guilt twisted her features. Sebastian, please, it's not what you think. I let out a bitter laugh, stepping back as she reached for me. Don't, I warned. Don't insult me with excuses. I saw you, Mariana. I saw you kiss him. My father. The word was poison. The man who raised me, the man who told me I shouldn't trust you. How could you do this? How could you destroy our relationship, betray my family, like this? Tears welled in her eyes, but I felt no sympathy. She was broken, yes, but so was I. Sebastian, I never meant for this to happen, she whispered. At first, it was just a mistake. Then it got complicated, and I didn't know how to stop. I laughed, humorless. A mistake. My voice rose. It wasn't a mistake, Mariana. It was a choice, one you made over and over again. Her silence was damning. I loved you, I said, my voice raw. I thought you loved me, too. I do, she whispered. I shook my head. No, you don't. If you did, this wouldn't have happened. It's over. I turned to leave, ignoring the way she called after me, the way her presence begged me to look back. But I didn't. I never saw her again after that night. The betrayal lingered like an unhealed wound, but I knew I had to move on. My mother, devastated by my father's infidelity, wasted no time divorcing him. We both endured the collapse of our family in silence, navigating the ruins of what was once our home. And yet, my father and Mariana remained together. Perhaps their betrayal had been worth it to them. Perhaps, in their world, love excused even the worst of sins. But not in mine. Time is a way of dulling even the deepest wounds. And though the pain of their deceit will always remain, I learned something far more important. Peace is not found in revenge or justice. It is found in choosing to move forward, no matter how much it hurts. And so, step by step, I did